And it's David, is it?
It is.
David, please.
Please state your full name.
It's David John Farrugia.
Take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
the evidence I shall give,
shall be the truth,
the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
David, we're going to put up on screen again your dad's photo, 12188015. Thank you. David, we've just heard from Tony, your twin brothers. I'm not going to go over any of the records or any of the evidence that Tony's given. What I wanted to ask you about, first of all, are your memories of your dad becoming ill, first of all with hepatitis?
The earliest memory would probably be, I'd say, 75, 76. We was living in Ilford. And I just remember him being yellow, puffy. I believe he spent a few days away from the family home in hospital. Obviously, I didn't know why or, being so young. So,
I think you'd estimated it in your statement as being 76 or 77, but the date doesn't really matter. Sometime in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And then you have a memory of your dad wanting to watch a World in Action programme. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I believe it was obviously before he told me he was HTLV free or, he had AIDS. I believe it would have been early 85. And I can remember, being kids, we were chopsing as you do, and he was telling us to be quiet so he could watch the telly. So, but again, we didn't connect it. So.
And then it was in September 1985 that your dad told you of his diagnosis. What can you recall?
Yeah, I used to be into athletics, keen runner. Used to run for Essex Beagles. And I'd returned home one night after some track events, and he sat me down and said that, he was, I think he might have used the word AIDS, he may have used the word HTLV free. I do remember asking, if he was going to die, and his answer was he didn't know. So.
And then you've said in your statement that not long after that, you began to put things together from media reports about AIDS and realise how serious this was.
Yeah, as Tony said, it was coming out in the media, Rock Hudson and, the gay plague, and splashed all over the newspapers. I do remember my dad telling me that night not to tell anyone. Obviously, I went to school the next day and I did tell someone, and, before the end of the day, the whole school knew.
And you've said you then got picked on at most lunchtimes.
Yeah, most lunchtimes.
People would say your dad was gay, bent, or he takes it up the arse.
Yeah.
And it got to the extent that the bullying was such that your dad had to have a meeting with your head of year about it.
I believe he went up to the school and it was discussed. Yeah.
But it got even worse after your dad died.
Yeah, after he died. Obviously there was another 2 years of me still being at school, because he died a couple of weeks into my last 2 years at school. So when I did return, a couple of weeks after he died, it just continued. So.
We've looked at the records with Tony of how your dad's physical and mental health deteriorated between 1985 and 1986. You were there when your dad was sectioned under the Mental Health Act and taken to hospital. What can you recall?
Obviously, I can't remember. I can remember that night, but the events leading up to it, I believe he'd left hospital and walked home from Whitechapel all the way to Dagenham. I think he'd stopped at his works. There was a meeting there and he wanted to be there, and then he came home, and I think it sort of went downhill from there then. And I remember the ambulance turning up. 2 men got out, and it was along the lines of if he didn't get in the ambulance, they'd put him in a straitjacket. So obviously my stepmum and my eldest brother Vince and myself, was trying to coax him to go to hospital, that they'd make him better, and And I think eventually, probably after a couple of hours, we did manage to get him in to the hospital, and he was admitted then to the mental ward. And I think you've already read the statement of when he was admitted about his pens and stuff like that, knife and fork, and you know.
And you've recalled in your statement some incidents before that at home, your dad not wanting to leave a customer's house work.
Yeah, I think that was in the lead up
Yeah.
to it as well. We had, and obviously I've spoken, my stepmum had told me about it in years after, that, he'd gone to a customer's house and insisted that her light was broken and stayed there till 1:30 in the morning, and there was actually nothing wrong with the light. So,
And walking down the street totally naked.
yeah, I believe that was it. That may have been after he'd come back out from the mental ward. I believe my stepmum had gone to Wales for a week for a bit of a break. Times were hard, and I can just remember. I think I was sitting in the living room and I heard the front door go, and the next minute he was walking down the street naked. So I had to run down, and it was almost like I was the adult and he was the child.
And you've also recalled him being aggressive, not at you, but
Yeah, and I can remember he had a technical drawing pad. So I do believe he was being educated. He'd gone to college to further his career in the gas board. He probably believed that they'd find a cure for it and that he'd carry on living. So I think he continued with the studies, but obviously when it all went, he went mental basically. He was drawing it on a pad, and I remember there was a red circle in the middle, and having researched it, it was known as the red button syndrome. So, and he was explaining to me about pushing it, and I didn't understand, I didn't understand. So.
And his physical appearance changed.
Yeah, he went grey. 36 years old. His hair was going grey. He'd lost a lot of weight. And I know in the thing, I do remember him eating excessively, where he ate a jar of pickled onions that my nan had made, and then was violently sick after. And we actually took him fishing that day to the Royal Military Canal in Kent. And I look back now and I have a little laugh. He was trying to teach him how to fish, and he was striking them so hard that all he was ending up on his hook was a pair of lips, where he'd ripped the fish's lips off. He was trying to get him to, but he wasn't right then. So
You didn't see him for the 2 weeks before he died.
yeah, I believe I saw him on the Saturday without looking at my calendar and going back. I saw him on the Saturday 2 weeks before he died. So just going off the top of my head, it would have been probably the 8th or 9th of September. He'd come home for the day, and I never saw him again after that.
After your dad died in September of 1986, what happened in terms of your living arrangements?
Well, my relationship with my stepmum had been bad for a long time, probably a good year. I believe a lot of it was probably what was going on at the time. A lot of people's behaviour changed, and I made the decision that I didn't want to live there anymore. So my Uncle Dave sat me down and said I had a list of choices. Obviously, being with him wasn't one of them because they were so far away from my school, so that wasn't an issue. I didn't want to go to Luton because I knew the relationship with my mum wasn't good with Tony, so that wasn't something that I wanted to do. So I said to him, put me in the care. So.
And you wanted to stay in your school and have at least that continuity to complete your education?
Yeah, that was Dad had always said, do well at school, get a good education. So, I thought if I stay where I am, I'm not going to be uprooted, and I wouldn't have to make new friends and change. And, the school already knew what was going on, and I was supposed to go to another school. If I talked about it, it would all happen again. So it was easier just to stay where I am with people that knew what was going on. So
an issue arose whilst you were living in care about you having to be tested for HIV.
I believe when my Uncle Dave approached the care home, they asked for an HIV test. He told them to F off. He said, you know, what are you insinuating? He's not a haemophiliac, so he's never been treated with product. So are you insinuating that he got it sexually? So anyway, it didn't happen. I didn't have the HIV test. When I went back to the second children's home, I developed a really bad sore throat and a chest infection. Obviously, I was worried about it. And my doctor, I was with my key worker at the time, and my doctor had suggested that it was maybe an idea to have an HIV test. And I wouldn't say that the care home made me, but I was a child, and you know, the way it was put to me, it was like it was a good idea. So I eventually did have the HIV test, which obviously I already knew would come back negative. So
The family was then fragmented, and we won't go into any rights or wrongs about that, but Tony was in care in the Luton area, you were in care in the Dagenham area.
Dagenham East, yeah.
Other members of the family were elsewhere. And although you had some contact with your twin, it was a few years, I think, before the two of you were back in regular communication.
When I was living with my aunt, you know, I did used to go up every couple of months. Whether the financial side of that was an issue, I didn't know about that. So I was probably seeing Tony, you know, every 3 or 4 months for, you know, maybe 1 or 2 days, and then I'd come home again. That went on until I was nearly 18. So, and obviously my other brothers, I never saw them. Paul I never saw till he was 16 years old. He was 3 when Dad died. And I never saw Vince until 2008. So some 22 years after my dad had died. It wasn't because there was a falling out between us. We just went separate ways, and we got on with our lives.
You then, I think, did end up in 1989 living for a period of time with your birth mother.
Yeah.
Because financially you had no support and couldn't go anywhere else.
It did dawn on me that the care home just wanted to get me out. You know, it was like once you get a job, you go into independent living. I would have been 17 at the time. It was living with 2 other boys in a 3-bed masonette, and there was a family of social workers that lived downstairs. So we were kept, you know, I would say an eye on. It was usually just to make sure we'd come home, I think. And normally after 3 months, if you proved that, you know, you could be responsible, they'd give you your own key and you could come and go as you pleased. But I was on the YTS scheme at the time. You know, it wasn't a lot of money. It was £29.50, I recall, and my rent was £25 a week. So they did reduce it to £12.50 a week. But, you know, living off of £15 when you've got to, you know, eat, clothe yourself and get to work, it just became impossible. So I rang my mum up and said, could I live up there? And I went up there in the January of '89. I wasn't there long, probably 3 months. We just didn't get on, you know. And funnily enough, I actually went to live with the friend's mum that Tony had gone to live with, and I was there for probably just under a year. And then I met my wife, married, children. So it was, you know, just get on with it, really.
You say in your statement that up until about 2005, you just tried to get on with your life and not think about what had happened to your dad.
We didn't know about all this. You know, we knew that 3 haemophiliacs in our family had been infected, as we found out as time went on. But we didn't know about anybody else, and it wasn't until probably 1991, when the HIV litigation started, that we then found out it was 1,243 haemophiliacs. And then it was possibly the mid-90s, maybe 96, 97, I believe. My Uncle Dave told us he was Hep C positive, and we then found out that it was 4,763 haemophiliacs. So, and it wasn't until probably 2029 when I'd kind of heard about the archer inquiry. I was off to the States for my honeymoon, and we was watching the telly that morning, and I can't remember who it might have been Hayden, it might have been Gareth. They was on the BBC News, and they'd spoken about the Archer inquiry. I left it there, I went on holiday, and then I came back, and I don't know why I did it. I just got my laptop out. Why I put in tainted blood, probably because I'd heard about it, and it was all there. And it was only then that I began to find out what really had gone on. So, and as Tony said, I spent a few years not saying anything, just standing on the sidelines, looking through timelines, and then my dad's medical notes turned up, and it all went from there, really.
There came a point after a number of years where you felt you needed a fresh start and you moved to Wales.
Yeah, I'd been working as a driving instructor from 2002, and I think all this just built up from probably 2010 when I started to become actively involved, you know, visiting Parliament, visiting my MP, meeting all these people here, you know, one at a time, sometimes a group of them. It just got too much for me, and I kind of got into a bit of a, should we say, fight with a member of the public that had pulled out in front of me. So we'd had neither of us went to the police, so it didn't go any further. But I think I knew then, in 2014, that this wasn't about me in the driving sense. I was angry about other things, and I do believe that was probably the turning point for me. So I packed the driving school in, I wound it down over a few months, and then just decided to get out of England. So I moved to Wales.
And what's the job that you found in Wales?
When I first went there, I was doing a bit of carpentry work with my brother, labouring, but I was struggling with that because, you know, I had a little bit of a bad back. And I went to an agency in Swansea, and they said, oh, we've got this company here, they're looking for some people to go and do a little bit of night work. And when she told me what it was, I was like, nah. I didn't tell her why. It was to do with viruses. And then she rang me back up a couple of days later and said they'd got me an interview for the job that I had applied for, but would I mind going down to this place just for a couple of nights, just to help them out? And I thought, well, you know, there can't be any harm in it. I'll go down and see what it's like. And I'm still there. So.
And it's a company that makes HIV tests?
They do.
And other tests?
We do. Most of the viruses that the haemophiliacs have seen, we make all the tests for them. So.
We've heard from Tony that there was no support from social services or in the form of counselling for him. What position did you find yourself in?
The same. You know, it was almost like we were told to get on with it as children. You know, the care home was good. They looked after me, but not, I suppose, not mentally, really. You know, we never really spoke about anything. There was never any contact from any group out there. You know, the Haemophilia Society. You know, it was almost like we'd just been pushed into the long grass. And I believe it was when Tony contacted the hepatitis through Sue Feckrell. He gave me the number, and I contacted them, and I had some counselling leading up to the Penrose inquiry. It didn't help. It did in for bereavement, but they couldn't answer any of the questions we had because they didn't know. So.
You have spoken a little in your statement about your Uncle Vicky and your Uncle Dave.
Yeah, obviously we found out 2 or 3 weeks after my dad had died that Uncle Vicky was also HIV positive. You know, it was devastating. You know, we'd lost our dad and now we was going to lose an uncle. And, you know, over the next 12, 13 years, I did keep my distance because I found it hard. I did see him, but it got more difficult and more difficult as you see how frail he was getting. You know, he suffered terribly. So, and I think the last time I saw him was probably 3 months before he died. So I couldn't face it. with my Uncle Dave, we'd stepped up, hadn't he? You know, he'd almost... You know, he was like our dad. And I think that was probably what pushed me over the edge in 2012. It took a couple of years, but I think when we lost him, it was, you know, that was the third one. So it was difficult. Again, I avoided him. You know, probably for the last 18 months he was alive. So that's been, you know, that's been tough.
In terms of the McFarlane Trust and other support schemes, the observation you've made in your statement is that as the child of someone who'd died, but who by the time the schemes were set up was just on the cusp of adulthood, you received no money in your own right.
No, only, you know, what you saw in that letter, and there was a payment where it was technically like child support. You know, it was, I think the figure was around £632 per year that we was under the age of 18, and there was a category G payment of £2,000. Obviously, at the time that came, I was married, I had children, and I used the money to put a deposit down on a house. So, and that was it really. I've never gone to them anyway, because we've always been of the belief, or we've always had the attitude back from them that, well, you're an adult now, you know. So I just don't waste my time. There's no point, you know. You're just going to have a door slammed in your face. So.
Those are the questions I have for you, David. I'm going to ask Mr. Snowden if there's anything else he would like me to ask. There isn't. I think there's something else that you wanted to say.
Yeah. Obviously, I started looking into things, you know, 10 years ago. And I found a document. It was a PDF document. It was the history of haemophilia, I believe. It was written in 1991. Lots of doctors present. Some I knew the names of. Obviously, others I've learnt the names of as we've gone along. And there was just a little extract here that I wanted to make aware to the inquiry, so I'm just going to read it. Can I name who?
Yes, you can.
The actual statement, I believe, is Dr. Peter Jones. And I'll just skip the first little bit, but he goes on to say that when I buy fish fingers from Sainsbury's, I know where they have come from. And I know where my honey comes from, but I don't know where blood products come from. I also know that as well as hepatitis B, manufacturers knowingly imported blood products that were known to be HIV positive. I also know that within the European community, I have documentary evidence that there has been relabelling of blood products unknown to the Committee on Safety of Medicines. These things go on whenever you get a product which is being sold for profit, and they are bound to happen.
Thank you. Sir Brian.
Thank you very much. You don't waste words, I think, but you've added a lot of colour and support in many ways, although you have a slightly different perspective on what happened, because you've got different memories from your brother. And I see your evidence together, as it were, as one, even though you've told it separately. Thank you very much indeed. We were thinking of having a late lunch. The uncertain time of the next witnesses to give evidence means I think it is sensible to have it early rather than late. My apologies to anyone who overate at the last break as a result. But the lunch is being set up as I speak, and we'll take an hour's break, but please no more than an hour because we have a full afternoon. As I've said, we will be here till we finish, and no one who's giving evidence should feel under any pressure to speed up just because they think it's late and it's Friday. I'm here, we're here. So 1:30, back please, promptly.